Now, for more on the impact of aging on the global economy and beyond, I'm joined by Isaac Cohen. He's the president and CEO of Inverway, a business development consultancy. He was also a former director with the United Nations Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean. Welcome, Isaac.
Thank you, Michelle.
So in your view, what would you say are the biggest fiscal challenges that governments face with an aging population?
Well, I would say the biggest challenge any economy confronts with a decrease in population is the reduction of the labor force, which becomes a hindrance to increasing economic growth. Take, for instance, in the United States, President Trump is saying he wants the economy to grow 4%. But the size of the labor force in the United States is decreasing. So the only way you're going to be able to grow 4% as he wants from 2% is if you increase the amount of people that are in the labor force. And there are two ways, I would say, that are available right now in order to do that, and that's to have more children, as your segment suggested, and the other one is immigration. Because if you don't have local labor, well, you bring it from abroad.
Right.
But that's very controversial, as we've heard here. And then there's a third option, which is much more complicated, which is automation. You know, robots and that kind of thing that are going to replace people that don't ask for vacation, don't ask for leave, don't complain. That kind of thing is a dream and a utopia that is over there, but it's not doable. So we have a big problem.
So let's break down some of these issues. So as for these corporations who are really seeing that the workforce is going to be shrinking, how should they be preparing for this?
Well, they're putting pressure on the government to give them, for instance, the capacity to bring in more workers from abroad. You realize that the high-tech companies in the United States, for instance, are trying to get workers that are well-trained from abroad. But then this idea that immigrants here that come to take away jobs from other people, you know, and that kind of objections, a nativist backlash that we're seeing in the United States is complicating the possibility of bringing in immigrants. And women just don't want to have more kids, you know, and so what are we going to do?
Now, one option, as you mentioned, is this issue of automation. How far will that go to offsetting some of the losses that we're going to see as the population ages out of the workforce?
Well, we see already instances where you have labor replaced by machines. For instance, when you go to the bank, you hardly speak to somebody, you speak to a machine. That can happen, and you see, for instance, the assembly lines have increased the amount of robots, and manufacturing production has increased despite the fact that they're not hiring more labor. So that would be an alternative. But I think that in the interim, what we need to do is if women are not going to have more children, then bring in more immigrants.
And so when you look at countries around the world, who is really doing the best job of balancing their younger and older generations?
Well, I would say that those countries that experience after the war a boom in population are experiencing difficulties right now. Your figures were correct in the sense that Japan, for instance, has a big problem. But take the United States, I go back to that. The population is increasing at 0.7%. The only ones that are increasing are the minorities. And for instance, Latinos are increasing 2% a year. So there you have a solution. If you would allow more immigrants, perhaps that would be an immediate solution.
And you touched on this issue about women perhaps not feeling comfortable having more children. And IMF Chief Christine Lagarde said that parts of Asia risk becoming old before they become rich if they really don't boost the proportion of women in the workforce. And that means by better facilities, maternity leave, more childcare benefits and incentives. Why is that so important?
Well, because women are willing to go to the labor force and work full-time if they can have facilities in order to leave your kids well taken care of, and really the government has to provide that, because there's no way the private sector can do it. So if you are able to provide, as in, for instance, in the Scandinavian countries, you provide great health care for kids and child care for moms, you know, that can go to work, I guess that's a way of solving the problem. But look at Japan. Japan has been trying to do that, and it's getting very complicated.
Well, thank you so much. Always good to have you on. Isaac Cohen.